Apple is great and Android is great, but the best
Yeah.
operating system is still BlackBerry.
Hi everyone, welcome to the fifth episode of the Flight Circuit. For today, we have six of us, and everyone's going to introduce themselves. We have two teams. One is for Apple, and one is for Android. So on the Apple team, it's myself, Akshay,
Yeah, hi, I'm
Akshay,
Akshay.
and then
Hi,
there's
I'm Kabir.
Kabir. Uh, yeah, Shikhar's on the Android team, of course. He's not on any other team. Then there's Rishit on the Android team,
Hi guys.
and of course,
And I'm
Hriday.
Hriday on the Android team.
I'm Shikhar. I use an Apple phone.
Nah, there's
While I be supporting Android, I'm a believer of Linux.
Shekhar is providing unnecessary comments, but sure. Okay, so we can begin by Kabir, Akshay, since you're for Apple, do you all wanna present your views?
Yeah,
Wait,
sure.
Adarsh, you're
So
for Apple too. You have nothing to say. Or
then let's start at least, man.
No, I would like to hear my peers' views on the topic before I can
Yeah.
express my own opinion.
Yeah, so I don't mind starting. So I'll just go with like some generalized things. So firstly, I think everyone over here knows that Apple's probably the biggest company in the world because it does have the highest market cap, which is like $2 trillion, and I don't think Android's even merely close to that. And that just like already starts to show like the dominance Apple already has in the technology
No, but
industry.
to be fair, Android's not a company, bro.
No, yeah, but even if you consider like Samsung alone, which is like Android's biggest thing.
Doesn't the fact that
Why does Android
Apple is
directly
such a
become synonymous with Samsung? I never get that.
Yeah.
Because
but Kabir, doesn't the fact that Apple have such a large market cap just prove that they just rip off all their customers? On the other hand, all the companies that use Android are really nice. They have like these open operating systems, and they don't really work on profits, but they work for the people, like Karl Marx.
wait, do you
But
think
They
he's
like
work
having
for the
open
people. They work for
software?
the people
Shekhar,
making
you're
free
saying
explosives,
Android
not
works
Shikhar.
for the people, right?
yeah, they work for the people. It's always cheaper. It's really compatible. Like further, the best example is that you yourself, Adarsh Agarwal, are using nothing buds, and you're using those with Apple. So that just proves that we're so compatible. While Apple is essentially, think of Apple as the Nike of the Adidas of the technology world. Like they're there, they're big, but they're not good.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that Rida is doing the same thing with Android, where he's using AirPods with a Android device. So if you're talking about compatibility,
I'm
I
using
mean,
Windows and AirPods because I was gifted the AirPods and they're the only Apple device I own. So just clarify.
See,
Yeah, just to clarify, these are the only
But yeah,
Android
I mean, anyways, sure,
devices I
Kabir.
was.
Like coming to your point, like it's kind of sad that like the first thing an Apple fan has to say on an Apple versus Android debate is market share and just about like how much the company is worth rather than something nice they've done over their tenure, or like at least some of the nicer things that used to happen when Jobs was around. But about your whole market share, like we know how overpriced your device, like Apple devices are, and it's a huge contribution to why your company is worth that much, and you create this sort of brand exclusivity. And like, okay, fair play to that, but why at such a high price, and why create like why market yourselves as something you aren't? Like something that Apple really doesn't market as something that they are is like that partnership with Foxconn, which is their Chinese manufacturing tie up, and Chinese manufacturers and labor unions are known to treat their laborers not really well, and that's something that Apple never hide. Apple always hides, and it's something that's not part of their company narrative at all, even though all their phones are assembled in China or India.
No, I
yeah.
think on the way, Akshay, you saying something?
Yeah, no. I the the point about the phones being overpriced never makes sense to me because the highest end Androids, which are essentially the premium Samsung phones, are considered the competitors of the premium iPhones. So if you go like Pro Max versus Ultra on Samsung, they're priced basically the same. And spec for spec, also they're pretty similar. So it doesn't make sense to say that if you compare an iPhone to a mid-range or a low-end Android device, then obviously it's going to seem overpriced. But you have to consider the value and the fact that the price doesn't come purely for the device. Like if you take the example of cars, right? You can buy a Mercedes or you can buy a Maruti. Both will get you from one place to another. Both are cars, and effectively you could be as comfortable in a Maruti, but there's a feeling of achievement and a feeling of quality that you get with Apple that I think is the reason why they're able to retain so many of their users.
I think you're quite wildly off over there when you say that it's only the high-end Android phones, the Samsung ones specifically, as you say, that are competitors with phones like the 13 Pro Max or the iPhone 14. Now, an example I'd like to give is a phone that costs barely just $200, the Redmi Note 11. If you just check the specs of this phone, which is actually it's so cheap, it's like one-sixth the cost of your iPhone 13 Pro Max. And its chip is amazing. Its charging is faster than the iPhone. Its display is just as good. And as you know, Android in general has almost as good or even better cameras than Apple does. So your argument kind of falls apart because you're just lying.
No, you
Oh,
are.
yeah.
Also, no,
Or not only that, like I just checked the pricing on the Pro Max, the new 14 Pro Max and the S22 Ultra. The Pro Max is a good 40,000 rupees up. So
Yeah,
one
yeah.
lakh 40,000. The
I just wanted
S22
But
to.
Ultra
it's
is at a
but
lakh.
it's much newer.
So okay, that
Also,
doesn't
another
matter,
point.
right? Like we don't. How new is it? Like 6 months new, and you're paying
Wait,
40,000 rupees for 6 months worth of more R&D. That still can't be proved through benchmark tests,
yeah,
right?
I
Like you see
agree
my
with like
point.
the price difference right now, but I think Akshay forgot like one of the main Samsung high ends is like the new Fold Ultra, which is almost double the price of like a 14 Pro Max. So it almost makes iPhones look affordable compared to like an Android
Yeah, but
phone.
sure, let's
I
wait for
think,
when iPhone come up with a fold or a flip, and let's wait to see how much
yeah,
that is priced. You can't be
yeah,
I
comparing a
think
when they
Redmi
do
with
Apple's
a
gonna
when they
fold.
do come out with it, I can assure you it's not gonna start cracking the first day of use, bro.
There's not gonna be a line after
But
200 bends.
That's gonna
Apple's
be certain. No, I think
Android,
yeah.
all just snobby and rich. I think we all know very well that Android, you can't just take one foldable phone released after so many years and then say that costs as much as a phone that you've literally been making the same phone from 10 to 14 for the past whatever decade. They've just been researching the same damn thing every time. They don't change it, they don't make it better. And then you're comparing some 10-year-old technology that Android had to a foldable phone, and then you're saying, wow, it makes Apple look affordable. That argument there's no base to that argument.
Shrikant,
see,
people.
no. Wait, so like first two things that you said, like the first thing you talked about the Redmi phone being like $200. I think again we're comparing like one single company. Apple's predominantly like the kind of people that Apple's going for, not the kind of people that Redmi is going for. That's a fact. That's probably both companies know that. And Redmi is like at the lower end of the Android spectrum. So like if you're comparing them to Apple, that becomes unfair because Android again is an operating system,
Okay,
right? You're
fair. Okay,
comparing,
fair. But like,
yeah.
let's look at like a mid-level and iPhone and a mid-level Android. Like your mid-level iPhone is something like your sorry, your SE 2022 or your 12 mini or 13 mini, right? Something that comes in I think at like $699. And I think for around the same price range, like 2 years ago, OnePlus came out with the Nord, and Samsung have like their own lineup of like the A71 and the A72 and Samsung's own S series fan editions, which are around the same price. And you look at the stats on those phones for the same price, and then you start to see the differences.
Wait, so again, I think even Shikhar brought up the fact that stats are really important. Like if you say like Apple's camera has been like 12 megapixel for like as long as I can remember, and even then it competed better, if not as good as Samsung or Android flagships that were like 60 megapixel cameras. It was still
Yeah, no,
doing
we're
as
not
power, taking better
talking about
pictures.
just Yeah, we're not talking about just camera stats. Like, I mean, sure, each company has its right to optimize its camera system and cost effectiveness by choosing to either spend more on hardware or spend more on software. And like, clearly, Android and Samsung chose hardware optimization and less R&D on software optimization. And that's something that Apple hasn't done. And then we even have Android phones that chose software optimization over hardware optimization because for like a decade or so, you had the Google Pixel producing really good quality photos out of just one 8 megapixel lens. So I think that debate is really subjective, and I don't think we should be talking about that. I think we should start talking about like what these companies' ideologies are and like the sort of principles they stand for and the kind of product that they're making and how that impacts the world we live in today. So, I mean, if you all want to shoot off on that, that'd be great.
You do you mind if
Yeah,
I continue?
yeah,
Okay,
you can go ahead.
so we're talking about ideologies. I think that's a very, very big point where Android is far ahead. I think Apple, especially this whole concept that they have that you can only use Apple with Apple. You know how it goes. Um, that that puts you in a cycle where all your data is stuck with Apple. Everything is with Apple. You keep buying Apple. They get you addicted to it, and that just fuels modern excessive consumerism. On the other hand, Android keeps everything at a lower price. They don't add too many unnecessary features that get you addicted. They don't um they don't force you to stick with Android so that you're just stuck there forever and all your data is with them. And in the process, they're leading our world to a much better place where people aren't stuck to their phones and just constantly buying the same product over and over.
One sec,
Uh,
because what
No, I think
Wait,
I
that
can
that
clear up
I
what
get
Shikhar
your
meant to
point
say.
about like you thinking that Apple like addict people to continue buying their products, but I think like you're looking at it differently. I feel it's more like the entire Apple ecosystem, like Apple's able to set up. Like it's just so easy to transfer from a old device to a new device or changing your laptop, and like that ease of just transferring data and just being easily connected is why people like now switch to Apple or just continue with Apple. Like you'll always hear about someone going from Android to Apple and not really Apple to Android.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I just need to make this point that switching from an Android to an Android is not that hard. It's very easy. In fact, many companies themselves give you apps that allow you to switch from Androids to Androids, and in fact, they also help you to. They even switching from Android to Apple is not that hard. It's actually Apple the one. Apple the one is who is not making it easy to switch out of Apple, and I think that's the point Shikhar is trying to make. That once you get into Apple, their ecosystem just makes you stay inside, and that is pretty dangerous because like he said, in terms of data, it I don't think many people know this, but see, all companies at the end of the day are going to look at data as a source of a great source of revenue in the future, right? and
It's the new
and yeah, and this applies to Apple also. I mean, we all know that. And so the only thing for for the consumer to do in such a in a world developing in this manner is not to put all their eggs in one basket, right? So maybe spread out your data, like say your health data stays with one company, or your any say home data like smart home devices and all that goes to another company. And in the Android ecosystem, that's very easy. It's not that you're stuck only with Apple. Whereas in Apple, you'll be stuck with Apple Home, Apple Fitness, so on, and basically everything has ended up going to Apple. And actually, if you see, I'm not sure of the exact statistics, but between 2 years, I think from 2021 to 2022, Apple's revenue from advertising itself doubled. And while Apple likes to talk about how they take care of your privacy and so on and so forth, and save or rather keep your data private from advertising companies, who I'm talking about, I think that this is this is real life proof that the only reason they're saying this and the only reason they're pushing features in their iPhones and other Apple devices that are against such companies that advertise is that they want to promote their own advertising industry because they know that that is the future.
Okay, yeah. So you can speculate that they're selling your data. Okay, so we can address all the points one by one. So the first is not keeping all your eggs in one basket. That doesn't make much sense because if you look at the devices that you have, let's say you have your phone, your watch, and your earbuds. Those are the three primary, like what you could consider main parts of the ecosystem. There's not many people who have Google Home or Apple Home or whatever. Like at least not in India, I haven't seen it that widespread. So if your earphones aren't collecting any data, realistically, collecting the type of music that you listen to or something is anyways happening on your phone. So your earphones have no real value there. And if your watch is connected to your phone and you're using an app on the phone, then the data is going to the phone company anyways. So what the phone is still the central part of the ecosystem. So whichever company you bought your phone from, they have access to all your data. Then the next is the facts, which are that if you look at the recent update, the recent iOS update, they now allow you to literally specifically check each and everything that an app is monitoring, allow it, not allow it, and like you can actually go into settings and see the details of exactly what is happening. And so if you
Okay, I'm sorry.
block
Can I
all the
interrupt here for
tracking,
a second? I just want to
realistically, yeah,
I just want to clarify. The feature you're referring to, is this the app transparency or some? It's called something like that. Is that the one you're referring to? What is it exactly called? I'm
yeah.
sorry, I forgot the name.
I don't know the exact name, but I mean
Yeah,
it
the
it
transparency one,
essentially gives
right?
you the pop-ups and yeah.
Right. So about that, actually, if you've seen on both Androids and iPhones, there's something called your advertising ID, right? And if you disable your advertising ID on either Android or iPhone, it basically cuts off all apps from using any of your personal information to serve you personally targeted ads. So Apple coming out with app tracking transparency, I believe that's what it's called. Apple coming out with that is just a way for them to show that, hey, look, we also have this feature. And even more than that, because actually they already had it before, they just introduced app tracking transparency as, say, a rebrand of an existing feature. And to add to that, actually, um, the advertising ID on your iPhone is used by third-party apps to serve you personally targeted advertisements. And by disabling that, yes, you will disable third-party apps from serving you personally targeted advertisements. But Apple apps like stocks, the App Store, so on and so forth, these apps don't use the advertising ID. These apps use your Apple ID to serve you personally targeted ads. And once again, that just shows that Apple is. Yeah, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
There are no
Mm,
ads in the stocks
yeah,
app actually. Yeah.
most
I'm
of these
sorry, I
Apple
can.
apps, they don't have ads.
No, I'm sorry, I can show you a snippet from Apple's privacy policy that they use data from stocks and
Huh.
the App Store to serve you personally targeted advertisements.
Yeah, I
And
just want to
like,
We'll
bring
save
up
that
like
for the
a
chat. We'll save that.
yeah, just like a
yeah,
small point. So,
sure.
you were talking about like Apple's like, like its own apps, like the App Store, stocks and fitness, like doing personalized ads. But I still think like I always found it funny, like the weather app, I think on every Android phone still shows advertisements when you log into it. So if you're like talking about personalized advertisements on like personal or like Apple apps, I mean, I just think it's kind of ironic that basically every Android weather app still shows a particular type of advertisement, even if you have disabled your
Okay,
Who told you that?
actually,
Told you
no,
that
this is
all
my
the
weather
you can
app, and there are no advertisements.
you
Let me
can
see.
yeah, I mean it won't show up instantly, but it's like a known
No,
thing
just
that
no
Android
advertisements.
weather apps do
I'm
get
sorry, just
ads.
No,
no
you
You
can't
can
advertisements.
just
like
Kabir, you
you
can't go
can
to
see it.
whatisbetterphone.com and then start asking about weather apps and ads and then
Yeah, but the
claim that
same
over
way how
there.
Rishit has no, like, even the App Store has no personalized ads like he was talking about. So,
Okay, I'm sorry. I think you misinterpreted what I said. What I meant was they use information they use your personal information from stocks and the App Store to serve you advertisements. And actually, even on the App Store, if you see, there are some promotional apps. I don't know what they call it, but it says that it's promoted by Apple, something like that. I'm not sure what it says, but yeah, that is very much
That's what
existent on the
that's
App
like
Store.
apps of the month and stuff, but that's they're on literally every gaming console, every like
No, I think I know what he's
yeah.
talking about. When you search for a particular app, regardless of whether it's an app or a month, sometimes it gives you like a promoted app where people have like paid for coming up as a first search. So yeah, like that's definitely a thing that happens. But I think since we're sort of talking about this privacy kind of thing, I think Apple's taking steps in like the right direction at least. So like I think like two software updates before they released like this private relay thing where you can like hide your email ID, create like a fake iCloud ID on the spot for all emails to be forwarded to your original email ID or your Apple ID. And nobody like the people who are signing up. So like if I'm going to a website which is like a shopping mall and I want to like sign up for something, they don't see my ID, they just see a fake ID that Apple's created, and all the email gets forwarded to my ID, so they never get a hold of any of my data. So like even you can argue as to how transparent they're being with like other things that they're tracking, but I think like steps like this, or like when you open like an app and it tells you whether your location is being tracked, or you can completely disable an app from ever tracking you. I think those are at least steps in the right direction. I don't know how much of stuff like this Android is really doing. So like if any of you all want to touch upon that.
Two, since we're on data and privacy, are all of you on Apple's side aware of the billions of dollars of fines that Apple had to pay for antitrust? Let me give
I
you a
think
quick
if you're the largest
overview.
company in the world, I think that comes with every single lawyer trying to get money off you
Wait,
as well. So I
no, it's
think
not every
you're
single
gonna pay
lawyer.
fines.
No,
No,
it's not every single
I
lawyer. French
I'm sorry,
antitrust
Adarsh.
case
Also,
was
if
one.
you're also the company that advertises that literally comes forth as the privacy protecting company, then all these fines should not be thrust
Yeah,
upon
so
you.
wait, can I give you
I
a
mean,
quick answer?
are you telling me Android does not pay fines?
You want to hear
It's
how
I
many
different
know,
cases?
court
I
cases.
Apple just finished off paying in 2018 a $15 billion fine to the EU. They finished in 2020 a separate fine just to French courts on top of these EU fines of 1.1 billion euros. They're currently paying Brazil for creating some other problems of privacy with them. And
One
currently,
second, Fikar.
EU is
That's
uh,
the
accused
case for the
I
Apple
don't
Dutch
of
think
breaking
the
chargers.
law.
yeah,
That
the
is the
Brazil
case
thing
for
is
the
not a
Apple
chargers.
privacy
break
thing. That's a
4
fact that
billion.
Apple phones are sold without chargers.
That's cool and everything,
Oh, thanks
but
for bro. Thanks for reminding me.
that's
Actually,
not
like,
fine.
thanks for
Yeah,
reminding me. No, no.
but
1 second. 1 second. About that. No, about that. Let's get to this
I think we
point.
touched
Hriday,
upon
one sec.
this.
Hriday,
Good reminder.
before you say anything, Hriday, I'd like to remind you that the latest OnePlus or whichever phone just came out
I'm sorry,
does not include
not a single
chargers.
And the
Not a
Samsungs
single
as
Yeah,
well.
OnePlus phone
And the
is
I know.
released
Samsungs
without a
as
I
well.
charger.
know. I'm aware. No problem. No problem. I still have a case against Apple for this. Okay. Okay. I think this was 2020, 2021 when Apple was like, "Oh, we'll go completely carbon neutral as a company," and they promised some year. I'm not sure about the year, but a part of this whole thing is they have this whole idea of using as less plastic and like you know less materials into their packaging, minimizing their size and minimizing thus the materials that they have to manufacture, source, and ship. um they market it's like they are saving the world, but it is solely a marketing strategy, right? It is doing the world actually no good. It's not saving on climate change. It's in fact increasing the amount of materials spent. It's increasing the amount of, like, it's decreasing the efficiency of the entire system. And when I talk about the entire system, I'm talking about you having to get a phone and then you having to get a charger for that phone. Okay, when Apple says, we're not making the charger because you're going to have an old charger. Okay, maybe that charger lasts you for 2 years, but then 2 years on, you get a more powerful, more efficient charger, and you want that, right? You want that technology. The problem lies when Apple tells the world that we're making the world a greener place, but they're only trying to show the world that they are making the world a greener place. It's not that the world is becoming a greener place at large, right? And that's a part of their entire marketing strategy. When they define system, the world as a system, and who's making the world a better place, they've defined the system as just Apple, right? Apple's contribution or Apple's carbon footprint is lower, but the carbon footprint of like the human race, it's not lower. It's like the whole electronic, like the electric vehicle thing, right? You're just shipping the pollution to somewhere else by producing electricity and mining so much minerals to produce the lithium-ion batteries. Because when I then order a charger separately on Amazon, it takes its own delivery guy, it takes its own packaging, it comes with its own bill, right? That's more carbon everywhere. And I think that's something that even though Android has started to do, the only reason for that is to compete with Apple, right? Because the world is a competitive place. And in order to remain competitive with Apple in terms of costs, right? Imagine if Android phone companies are spending that many more dollars on like sourcing and packaging chargers when their direct competitors not just on fixed cost, right? They're going to be wasting a lot more. When you say that Android's doing this, they're doing this to remain economically competitive with Apple, and they're not marketing themselves as OS saving the world, right? That's my point.
Yeah, guys, if you
No,
want
I
to
think-
if you
yeah.
want to hear a little more about the green energy side of this, Hriday and I covered it very well in the first episode of season 2. So go check that out. It's called Renewable Energy.
Yeah, no, I get the point that, about all the excess plastic, etc., that it's creating, but it's it's not that they actually aren't caring about the environment and the entire aspect of becoming carbon neutral, because I saw a video recently about the Daisy robot. I believe it was one of the popular tech reviewers who had gone on a tour of the entire robot and how it functions, etc. And like according to the projections, it can recycle 1.2 million phones in a year, and that's just one robot. So eventually, as they make more and more, you're talking about literally being able to recycle millions and millions of phones. And then, so it's not that they don't care at all, right? Otherwise, they have no reason to do it. They're using additional resources, additional electricity. They're having to buy warehouses, make these robots, and so if they didn't get it all, there's no reason to do it. It's not like their profits are increasing by.
Sure, no,
doing
I'm not
that.
doubting Apple's like morality or anything here. I just want to highlight their hypocritical nature because they love to project themselves as something that they aren't. Like you don't have Android advertising like, oh, we're the most privacy protecting complex software in the world. You don't have Android saying that, oh, we have some unrealistic carbon goal and like all Android companies or Samsung or Google or OnePlus is like saving the world, making the world a green place. Like their advertisement is we make the phone, we make a good phone and buy it because it's a good phone. We're not trying to create this public image of our company and then getting people to believe that Apple is also mighty, also good. Right? Like I think Apple's main success after Jobs, especially, like I'll give it to you, okay? Until the iPhone 5 stuff was really good. iPhone 6 good, but like iPhone 6, 7, 8, they all look the same to me. And then 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 pretty much look all the same to me, right? And I think the reason they've been able to sustain this dominance in the market is because they're playing on people's psychology. They're using psychological marketing left, right, and center, like everywhere. This whole overpricing of their product to create this niche to make people believe that, oh, it's because right, not everyone is an engineer, right? Not everyone is part of FSA and Cathedral who knows enough to like okay, is this phone really worth that much? Even though if you're an Apple user, you know you're paying that extra price. Like, I respect the choice you make, but maybe y'all are using it for the ecosystem convenience. But there are people and most buyers in this world who pay that extra 20K or 30K for nothing just because they want to get that Apple logo. It's that sense of brand that they've built. I mean, fair play to them. It's a very like crass and capitalistic thing to do, in my opinion. And then,
I
okay,
think
I'll come to another thing quickly about like the whole ideology of Android, like the beauty of it. It's an open source software. Like, it's like Google's made it public. Any company come pick it up, express the way you want to, make your software the way you want to. It's like, it is literally the people's software, right? They're not trying to make it something very exclusive only for the rich and affording. And I think in that sense, Android is way more compatible with the way the world is today, because I think majority of the world is somewhere in the lower middle class using Android, and working with Android then becomes the better option to connect with people.
And I think a lot of the way to compare it is when you look at Apple's main marketing, it's the fact that whoever uses Apple, they're basically like the way a BTS stan is, they're essentially like that for Apple. They go crazy over it. That's the main argument behind it. That, I love Apple, you should love Apple as well. If you don't love Apple, I'll kill you and all of Android. So
Okay,
that
wait, Shikhar, no. I wanna respond to this. I think Apple gets too much undue hate. I think, like, realistically, I think since Hriday said since 2000, like since the iPhone 8, there's not much that's changed or something on those lines. I think if you look at like when Apple removed the headphone jack, at that point that was considered the dumbest thing to be possibly done, right? Like every single person had a headphone. You plugged it into your phone. That was the status quo, right? And they did it when no one expected it, when no one thought much of it, and yet every single one of us sitting here was using AirPods. Not a single person uses headphones anymore. I mean, i- if I feel Apple's playing the long game, that probably is. I don't wants to innovate every single year. Apple wants to play it out. They have all the resources they want, and they take steps like that every few years. And I think when they take steps like that, everyone moves around those steps. So like for you to say it's just a BTS stan thing, then technically it would only be like the three of us at the top using at least AirPods or something like that, right? But that was not the case. Every single Android company, the day Apple released AirPods, like the next single day, there were like 500 copycat versions of them saying, here, buy our own thing. And yeah, I mean, you're such an open source, innovative platform, just ripping off other people. But still, I mean, Apple's, I think, yeah, along those lines, like if you look at those kind of things that Apple's done, I think Android people just completely forget that stuff like that ever happens. And then you all think that, Android's at the forefront of innovation. So, like when Apple had their launch of the iPhone, I think they called out Android. And then when Google released their new Pixel, they called out Apple for the entirety of the show. Like they were like, oh, some companies just had their face lock or something, and we've always had this. And then like minutes later, they introduced like 8K recording, which like Apple has had all the time, and then they called it like cinematic something else, which Apple has also had for like 2 years. So I think both companies share that part of like hypocrisy. You call the other person for being less innovative, and then you copy them. So everyone at this point is just trying to reach like a similar level of phone. But I think like if you
Yeah,
look
sure, no,
beyond
like
just
exact, like yeah,
yeah.
sure. I mean, like that's how competitive the smartphone market is, right? But I mean, I think all you were able to establish there, others, was that each company has a common vice. You won't be able to prove why either is better or not. I mean, it's Apple versus Android, not Apple. It's like, yeah, it's not Apple Union Android, it's Apple v Android. Like, we're not talking about similarities, we're talking about differences.
No, so I think if it's Apple v Android, we're quite limiting it to iPhone versus Android. I think if you look at the rest of what Apple has to offer, I don't see Android matching up to that. Like you can say the ecosystem is sucking up and like it's trying to get people into this uh sort of whatever you called it. But I think Android is just trying to replicate that. You all are trying to launch I think I don't know which company launched the phone, but if I'm not wrong, it's a Pixel watch or something. But
Yeah,
there's
Pixel
a new
Watch.
watch that's come out. Then y'all are trying to get back, like Samsung tablets want to make a move back. Y'all want to have like Pixel tablets. Google's trying to do different stuff. So y'all are coming at us for having the ecosystem then that's the sort of thing that y'all are envying, and y'all are also trying to build that up, right?
No,
So
I mean, we're not. No, see, look, we're talking about your ecosystem being restrictive. Android ecosystems are very compatible in and around each other with Windows and Linux as well. That's the point, right? Like we want people who have diverse choices in the tech products they buy to be able to share content with each other easily, not just restricted to like, oh, you have an Apple stick on the back of your laptop, so I can airdrop something to you, right? Like we all been at months, most of us, like the competitive advantage it is to have just a Mac because you get that after so like like okay, not 2 seconds, a good 5 minutes earlier because someone can just airdrop it to you, right? Like that's the kind
so
of
I
niche
think
I'm talking about, and fair it exists, but I think the world would be a better place without it. That's my point.
I mean, if a
Uh,
company that's developing a car developed a better car, you can't catcall it for developing a better car, right? I mean, if Apple has better technology, then it's kind of your fault if you can't get people to use it. Like if you can't get people to use
No, I mean,
Bluetooth, then that's not Apple's fault.
yeah, fine. It's not, but it's Apple's fault then that they're not sharing that technology with the rest of the world, and in the
No,
sense that
but you
restricting.
have Bluetooth, right? Apple developed AirDrop. It's for them to share among the competitors. I don't think pharmaceutical companies
Yeah, but
go
the
out
thing
giving
is,
like.
Bluetooth it works with everything, right? That's my point. It's less restrictive. It's more diverse. It's more inclusive, right?
Yeah, so
Like
why doesn't Android make it the status quo? Technically, all are compatible across Windows, across like Linux, like you said. There are enough Android laptops, enough Windows laptops. If it's
that's
so
the
much
point.
easier, then
Thank you
why
for
don't you all
proving
do
my
it?
point.
Yeah, so
I
why don't
think
you all do it? Is my point.
my personal conclusion from this debate was that Apple is great and Android is great, but the best
yeah.
operating system is still BlackBerry.
Point of factual error, BlackBerry is on an operating system.
Shikhar,
I don't know
you're
who thought it
passing
was a
BlackBerry laptop.
but who thought it was a smart idea to put a keyboard on a phone? I mean,